Story 1. The door that appeared above my bed. I never lived on the top floor. So why did a door suddenly appear in the ceiling above my bed? I first noticed it on a Tuesday morning. Not the sound that came later, but the door itself. I woke up unusually cold. The room felt wrong for some reason, as if the air pressure had shifted overnight. My blanket was tangled around my legs, and the ceiling seemed off. Brighter. Or maybe I was just half asleep. I rubbed my eyes, blinked a few times, and that's when I saw it. A small rectangular door in the ceiling, right above my bed. A door that absolutely, definitely had not been there the night before. I froze. For a few seconds, I convinced myself I was dreaming. I even slapped myself lightly. But the sting was real. The door stayed. The frame looked old, too old, like it belonged to a different building entirely. The wood was dark, chipped, almost rotten around the edges. There were even faint scratch marks near the hinges. I live on the 3rd floor of a building with 3 floors. Above me, the roof. There is no attic here. No storage space. Nothing. So where the hell did a door to somewhere above me come from? At first, I honestly tried to rationalize it. I even called my landlord. He insisted there is no door on the 3rd floor. He came over an hour later. And, of course, by the time he arrived, it was gone. Not faded. Not damaged. Just literally completely gone. My ceiling looked normal again. Perfectly smooth. A solid surface with no signs of recent construction. The landlord gave me a look. The kind of look someone gives when they want to avoid paperwork or a lawsuit. He shrugged, mumbled something about stress and lack of sleep, and left. But the worst part? As soon as the door disappeared, I felt watched, as if something behind the smooth plaster was paying attention to me. That night the sounds began. It started at 2:13 a.m., a soft tap, followed by another, then 3 more. I sat up, heart pounding. The sound came from the ceiling, right above where the mysterious door had been. Then the tapping stopped, and scratching began. Long, slow, deliberate scratches, like someone dragging their nails across wood. Except there was no wood above me. Only plaster. Only roofing material. I stood on my bed, reached up with a broom, and tapped the ceiling back. Silence. And then, knock, knock, knock. 3 hard knocks directly responding to mine. I dropped the broom. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, when sunlight hit the ceiling, the door was back. Same shape. Same rotting wood. Same scratch marks. Only this time the latch was slightly open. Just a few millimeters. Just enough to see darkness inside. I set up a camera. If the door kept appearing and disappearing, then I needed proof. I placed a chair on my bed, climbed up, and set my phone on a shelf aimed directly at the door. I turned on recording, left the room, and didn't come back until night. At 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of a loud crack. I grabbed my phone immediately and checked the footage. First, nothing. The room was still. The door was closed. Then, at 1:47 a.m., the latch started to move. Not fast. Almost painfully slow. Like someone was trying not to make noise. The door opened an inch. Dust fell. A thin, pale hand slipped out. My whole body tensed when I saw the fingers. They were impossibly long. Too long. The joints bent downward in silent, unnatural motions. The hand curled around the frame. Then another hand appeared. Then the top of a head. It wasn't human. Or it used to be and wasn't anymore. The head was bald, with skin that looked stretched too tight across the skull. The eyes reflected the phone's light. Not glowing, but wrong. Like they absorbed more light than they should. The creature didn't drop down. It hung there for several minutes. Just watching the empty room. Just watching my bed. Then, with a sudden, jerking movement, it snapped its head upward, as if something behind it had called. And it crawled back inside. The door closed. My phone kept recording for another 3 hours, but nothing else happened. Except one thing. At the very end of the footage, at sunrise, the door vanished. The wood faded into the ceiling like smoke dissolving into air. The 3rd night was the worst. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. Every sound made my skin crawl. The wind, the pipes, the distant hum of the refrigerator. My nerves were shredded. Around 1 a.m., the scratching began again. Only this time it was loud, aggressive, like something inside the ceiling was losing patience. I stared up, trembling. The plaster bulged, just slightly, but enough to see the shape of a hand pressing outward. 5 long fingers, dragging slowly across the ceiling, looking for a weak spot. Then a whisper, not in the room, not from outside, from inside the ceiling, just above me, a faint, breathy voice. Let me down. I stumbled out of bed, nearly tripping, and ran to the door. I grabbed the handle, locked, not from my side. Something had locked me in. The scratching intensified, faster, harder, more desperate. Then the crack. The ceiling door snapped open violently, hitting the plaster with a hollow thud. Dust rained down. A shadow shifted inside. A figure stretched an impossibly long leg downward, reaching for the floor. I fell backward, breath caught in my throat, unable to scream. The creature unfolded itself, piece by piece, like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. Its limbs bent incorrectly, joints popping into place with faint cracks. Touched the floor. And then, the worst moment of my entire life. It looked directly at me. Not at my body. Not at the room. It looked into my eyes. With purpose. With recognition. Like it had been waiting. Specifically for me. The creature leaned its head unnaturally to the side, the bones cracking softly. And then it whispered, with a voice that sounded like dry leaves rubbing together. You shouldn't have seen the door. I scrambled backward into the corner, shaking uncontrollably, as it took one slow step toward me. Then another. Its hand reached out, and the moment its fingers touched the floor beside my foot, the apartment lights flickered violently. Everything went white. I woke up in the hallway. My neighbor was shaking me, asking if I was okay. Others were gathered around, confused. They said they heard a loud bang from inside my apartment, like furniture being thrown. When I rushed inside, the ceiling door was gone. No scratches. No cracks. No dust. Nothing. Not even a sign the plaster had ever been disturbed. I moved out that same day. But I didn't sleep that night or the next because something followed me. When I finally forced myself to rest at my new place, at exactly 2:13 a.m., I woke to the familiar sound. Knock, knock, knock. I looked up. The ceiling was smooth, but only for a moment. Right above my bed, the plaster rippled. A faint outline began to appear, a rectangular shape pushing outward from the inside. And then I heard it. That same whisper, right above me. Let me down. Story 2. The thing that lives above the ceiling door. I never paid attention to the ceiling in my bedroom. Why would I? It was just a standard white plaster surface. Unremarkable, flat, even a little dull. Until the morning I woke up and found something new there. A square outline, perfectly cut, perfectly centered above my bed. A ceiling door. I stared at it for almost a full minute, trying to remember if it had always been there. But no, I'd lived in this apartment for 6 years. I would have noticed a trapdoor directly above my pillow. It wasn't small either. Maybe 2 feet wide, with a thin metal frame and a tiny recessed handle. It hadn't been there yesterday. Of that I was certain. I asked the landlord about it that afternoon. He looked at me as if I'd asked about a portal to another universe. There's no attic in this building, he said. No crawl space either. Whatever you're seeing must be a decorative panel or something. New tenants upstairs sometimes cause vibrations. Ceiling shifts a bit. But the handle, it's nothing. He cut me off. And even if there was a space above it, it would be completely empty. These buildings have no storage areas. He said it so calmly, so casually, as if he didn't care there was a new door in my ceiling. That night, things stopped being calm. The first sound. I woke up to a faint scraping noise. At first I thought it was coming from outside. A branch, maybe, tapping against the window. But it wasn't rhythmic. It wasn't random. It was slow, deliberate, like the sound of someone crawling. Above me, directly above the ceiling door, the plaster flexed, ever so slightly. A soft crack echoed, like ice under pressure. Something was moving on top of it. I lay there, frozen, watching tiny dust particles rain down with each movement. Then silence. A thick, suffocating silence. I forced myself to breathe quietly, shallowly, not wanting whatever was above me to realize I was awake. Minutes passed, and then the handle turned. Just a twitch like a muscle spasm. But it turned. The second night, I told myself it was a hallucination. Stress, fatigue. Maybe the handle was loose and gravity did the rest. But the next night, I heard the scraping again. Louder this time, less hesitant, like something was no longer afraid of being heard. Around 3:15 a.m., I gathered the courage to stand on my bed and reach up to the door. I pressed my palm against the surface. It was warm. Warm like a person had been pressing their body against the other side. I jerked my hand back, and from directly behind the door, something scraped its nails slowly across the wood. A greeting, or a warning. I don't know which, but the sound didn't stop. It followed me around the room. Everywhere I moved, the thing above me crawled correspondingly, tracking me. By dawn the door was silent again. Something watches through the cracks. 3 days later, I noticed the first crack. A thin line across one of the ceiling tiles near the door. Not huge but new, sharp, fresh, and behind it, darkness. Not the ordinary kind. A depthless black, like someone had carved a hole into nothing. I climbed onto a chair and looked closer. That's when the darkness blinked. I stumbled backward so hard I knocked the chair over. When I looked up again, the crack was empty, or maybe it had never been filled by anything at all. But I knew what I'd seen. An eye, a human eye, pressed against the gap between the plaster boards, watching me, blinking slower than any living person should. The night it pulled back. On the fourth night, everything escalated. At 2:58 a.m., the scraping began again, but now there was weight to it. The plaster sagged with each movement, dust falling like powder snow. The metal frame groaned. I stared as the handle twisted. Once, twice, and then violently. Something on the other side was pulling. Hard. Each tug slammed the door against its hinges. The screws creaked, bending ever so slightly. The entire ceiling shuddered. I lunged forward and braced my hands against the panel, pushing it shut with all my strength. Pulled back. There was no hesitation. No stealth. No question. Just raw force. Whatever was up there was strong. Stop! I screamed before I realized I was yelling. The tugging ceased instantly. The silence afterward was worse, because in that moment of stillness, I felt breath through the cracks around the frame. Warm, moist, close. Something was inches above my hands, exhaling, listening. The ceiling door vibrated with a soft, low sound. A chuckle. The breathing in the walls. I started sleeping on the couch. Didn't matter. At 3:09 a.m., I heard it crawling. Not above me now, but inside the walls. The drywall flexed. The hollow echo of movement followed me like a tide creeping along a shoreline. No matter which room I went to, it found me. I turned off all lights and stood perfectly still. The crawling stopped. Then, right beside my ear, on the other side of the wall, came the unmistakable sound of someone placing their palm flat against the plaster. Slow, deliberate. Then another palm. Then the faint sound of fingers tapping, testing, counting, searching for a way through. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and called the landlord again. "There's something in the walls," I whispered. A pause. Then, "Don't open the ceiling door." He hung up. He knew. The final night. Last night I reached my breaking point. I heard the crawling at 2:41 a.m. Then a sharp crack, louder than ever. When I looked up, I realized one of the screws was missing. The door was hanging slightly open. A black finger slid through the gap. Thin. Too thin. Jointed wrong. It curled downward like a hook and blindly scraped the air. Feeling, searching, eager. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Then another finger. Another. a whole hand flattening itself against the inside of the door. The gap widened, and for the first time I saw its face. Not fully, just the upper half as it pushed against the crack. Pale skin stretched tight, eyes like wet marbles reflecting the dim light. A mouth frozen in a smile it had likely practiced but never understood. It stared at me upside down, its head pressed sideways between the boards. "Found you," it whispered. I ran. Out of the room. Out of the apartment. Out of the building entirely. I didn't stop until I was in my car and halfway across the city. I haven't been back since. The landlord's message. Today I received a voicemail. The landlord's voice. Shaky. Panicked. "You opened the door, didn't you? You let it smell you. Listen, whatever happens, do not come back at night." It's active then. It remembers people. Climbs down. A pause. Then the sound of wood cracking in the background. Followed by a low chuckle. The same one I heard through my ceiling. The message ended abruptly. The ending, for now. I don't know where to go. I don't know what it wants. But every time I close my eyes, I see that face. Wedged between two pieces of plaster, smiling with 1,000-year hunger. And I keep thinking, I spent 6 years in that apartment. 6 years sleeping under that ceiling. What if the door didn't appear yesterday? What if it was always there? What if it was always there, and I just never looked up? Story 3. The person who climbs into my room every night. I don't remember when I first started feeling watched. Maybe it was weeks ago, maybe months. But I know the exact night it became undeniable, the night I found footprints on my pillow. Not mine, and definitely not from anything human. The chair. After the ceiling door incident, I did what any rational person would do. I blocked it. I dragged the heaviest chair in my apartment, a solid oak dining chair that weighed more than some people, and wedged it directly under the trapdoor in my bedroom ceiling. The door didn't open easily anyway, but the chair added security. Or so I thought. It made me feel safe enough to sleep in that room again. Safer, at least. When I woke up the next morning, I expected the chair to still be jammed tightly in place. It wasn't. Instead, it was placed neatly at my window, turned to face my bed, and dust was scattered across the seat, as if someone had climbed down from above, stepped on it, and quietly placed it aside. That wasn't the worst part. Across my pillow, inches from where my head had rested, were footprints. Small, pale,
Bare,
dusty, perfectly shaped, toes, arch, pale, as if someone had stood on my pillow, leaning over me while I slept, watching me, breathing over me, maybe touching my hair. My neck tightened so fast I almost choked. I dropped the pillow. My hands were shaking so violently I couldn't hold anything. I told myself I would leave the apartment, pack everything, go to a friend's place, a hotel, anywhere. Instead, I stood frozen until nightfall, terrified that if I moved, something in the ceiling would hear me. The scratching. That night I slept on the couch. It didn't matter. At 3:12 a.m., I heard the ceiling door creak open. Not in the bedroom. Above the living room. A door that didn't exist. At least not until then. Light dust drifted down from the ceiling like ash. Then came the sound of fingernails scratching, no testing the plaster from inside. Long strokes. Slow. Rhythmic. Something was moving above me again. Something that knew I'd moved rooms. I pulled the blanket over my mouth and forced my breathing to stay silent. The scratching traveled across the ceiling, stopped directly above me, and I swear I heard it exhale. A warm, moist breath through the plasterboard. Then,
top, top, top.
Fingertips on the ceiling, following the shape of my body from above. Tapped along my chest, my shoulder, my cheek. Then it stopped tapping, and started knocking. 3 times. Soft, but impatient, like it wanted me to open the door. I didn't move, not even a muscle. The second chair. The next morning I found another chair moved. Not the heavy oak one. My desk chair, positioned beneath a new mark on the ceiling. A scuff. A smear of white dust. The imprint of a foot. Meaning whatever climbed into my room could move quietly, quickly, and choose different entrances depending on where I slept. My apartment was no longer a home. It was a hunting ground, and I was the prey that always slept somewhere predictable. The whisper. The third night, I stayed awake. Not intentionally, fear simply wouldn't let me sleep. Around 2:57 a.m., I heard a faint metallic sound from the bedroom. The ceiling door's latch turning. Slowly, as if it knew I was listening. Then a whisper. Not a voice through the ceiling. A voice inside the room. Right behind the doorframe. A man's voice. Uneven.
Vet.
Like vocal cords hadn't been used in years. Said only one word. Coming. The bedroom went silent. Then the door handle clicked. Not the ceiling door. My bedroom door. Someone was trying to walk into my room from the hallway. Except there was nobody in the hallway. I checked. I always check. My apartment has only one entrance. A deadbolt steel door I keep locked. Nobody could have come inside. Which meant the person trying to enter had come from above. I pressed my back against the bedroom door, holding it shut with everything I had. On the other side, something pressed back. Gently, patiently, as if testing my strength. Then it stopped, and something slid across the floor, headed toward the couch. Toward me. I dove into the bathroom and barricaded myself inside until morning. The video. When sunlight finally hit the windows, I grabbed my phone and checked the security camera app. I'd placed a camera on the living room shelf facing the couch. The recording began at 2:54 a.m. At 2:57 a.m., the video glitched, static. White lines. The audio crackled. Then the ceiling door began to open. But not like a normal door. It bent, flexed, almost peeled downward, as if something inside was unfolding. A hand reached down, long fingers, joints bending sideways like broken wires. It gripped the edge of the opening, and then the face appeared, upside down, hanging, watching the couch, smiling far too wide. His hair dangled like wet threads. Its eyes reflected the camera light even though the room was dark. Then it dropped. Not fully. Just enough for its shoulders to appear. Then its torso. Then its legs. It stood on the back of the couch for a moment, leaning forward, sniffing the air above where I should have been sleeping. Then it tilted its head in a slow, unnatural arc. As if disappointed. As if confused. Then it stepped off the couch and walked straight toward the bathroom. Toward me. The recording ended when it reached the door. The night it pointed at me. Last night was the final straw. I didn't sleep. I didn't sit. I didn't blink unless I had to. At 3:08 a.m., I heard the door above my bed creak again. I crept toward the bedroom, not out of bravery, but because running felt useless. The door was half open. Dust floated down like snow. The metal handle twitched. The crack widened. A hand slipped through. Pale. Elastic. Knuckles protruding sharply beneath thin skin. It hung there for a moment, fingers gently flexing as if warming up. Then another hand appeared. Then an arm. Then the beginnings of a face. Just the mouth first, stretched into a slow, deliberate smile that crawled across its cheeks. As it descended, its neck twisted sideways, giving it an impossible angle to stare at me. And then the hand, the first one, lifted. Its index finger extended, and it pointed at me, not aimlessly, not vaguely, but directly into my eyes, as if saying, you're next. The door dropped another inch. I ran so fast I nearly broke my ankle. I haven't been back since. The final note. I'm writing this from a motel 2 towns over. But tonight, while unpacking, I noticed something on the ceiling above the motel bed. A faint square outline. Small, barely visible, but definitely there. And the dust around it looks disturbed, like someone opened it recently, like someone climbed through.